And as we get started, here for Zen Times 9, be a verb, I'll ring the bowl and just allow the tone to drift you a more open and receptive place to a topic and what it might mean for you in your journey. As the soft tone of the bowl returns to the silence that it emerged from, it's an invitation for us to take this time to do the same. So we begin tonight's topic. It's going to dovetail a little bit on what we did last session, Zen Times, when we talked about the ever-present ego, that sense of self-concept, self-importance, and how the ego sometimes tries, well, not tries, or sometimes, while the ego does exert influence when we shift our consciousness, our attention, our awareness to deepening our spiritual work. It wants to be involved too. Don't leave me out. After all, I'm your ego. And as we talked about last time, the ego, while it has many good positive functions, I mean, it keeps us functioning throughout the day, works very nicely with kind of the world. But when we cross the line and want to really do some deep spiritual work, the ego was really never equipped to go in that direction, although I would like to think it does. um, Tonight we're going to talk about another aspect of that, and that is to be a verb. Um, Several um, individuals have commented on this whole notion of being a verb versus being a noun. And let me briefly kind of talk a little bit about kind of the distinction. Um, a noun is defined as a person, place, or thing. A noun can be a label, can be um, a belief, um, what have you. Um, Overall, and I'm not going to get into the grammatical elements that define a noun or a verb. I'm going to talk primarily about this whole notion of um, how it plays out in our spiritual work. So, a noun is static. I am this. I am Tom. I have gone to college. I have had a career. I've raised children. I have a car. I've done this. And on the the superficial part of our life, all that stuff's very true. But when it comes to our spiritual life and how it can add an element of depth and richness to our lives. Consider becoming more of a verb. People like um, um, Oscar Wilde and Buckminster Fuller and Aeneas Nin, various authors have addressed this issue, and their conclusion has all basically been the same. And it's not any different than what the particle physicists have been telling us for a while, and what many of the mystics have been telling us for a lot longer, um, that we are a process. We are a process of continually becoming. That is radically different from the kind of stationary labeling, concept-driven experience of being a noun. Um, it, it begins to be something that becomes more dynamic, more fluid, more movement, more kinds of um, um, activity, and so that opens up a lot of possibilities in our spiritual exploration and in deepening our spiritual work. That we don't stay stuck with a concept, with a noun, with something that doesn't have the kind of dynamic component that a verb does. And one of the things about the shift of going from a noun to a verb, the identifying ourselves as a noun keeps me stuck in space and time. And so we don't have the opportunity, the fluidness to change. In Alice in Wonderland, looking through there's a lovely, lovely statement where Alice says, "I knew who I was this morning, but I have changed several times since then." I think that's a beautiful way of being able to bring into our lives the permission to be fluid, to be responsive rather than reactive. Remember, ego wants to protect that noun, that image, that static kind of "this is who I am," and rather than just being able to understand that oftentimes the person that goes to bed tonight is not the same person in some respects that woke up. Things happen to us. There were experiences, what have you, and physically, tons of things that happen to us. I mean, there's been all sorts of electrochemical stuff up here in our brain. There's been tens and tens of thousands of dying cells being replenished. There's been digestion. There's been filtering out, all sorts of stuff. We are constantly in motion. So if you call yourself or view yourself as a noun, you can't join in with the dance. We can't join in with what is occurring. And sometimes what we need to do is give ourselves that kind of permission to embrace the the fluidity of our lives. That if our lives are not static and lasting and permanent, it gives us much more permission to explore far more deeply into our spiritual work, because that is very, very fluid. And as I said last session, and as I started this one today, the ego wants to jump in. Oh no, I know how to do this. I know how to do this. It's really outside of the realm of the ego. It goes beyond what the ego is accustomed to. Not being able to adjust to um, um, comfort and being able to adjust to not knowing. Um, and there's a concept in Southeast Asian Buddhism called "don't know mind." It's that place that we go where we leave all of our need to know, all of our concepts, all of our learned stuff that we've accumulated over the decades of our lives, and reach that pure and open space where it's okay just to be in the presence of being. Being. ING. How can we bring more ing into our lives in a creative kind of way? And one of the things that the creator, whatever you decide to call it, gave us is this brain. And this brain has always been very, very curious. It wants to know things. It wants to discover things. It wants to explore. And that's been our nature as human beings. And in so doing, that self part of ourselves, our small self, has come to think that we are the knower and that is the known, rather than understanding that the knower and the known are in a constant interaction. And if there's one amongst many things that particle astrophysics has taught us, as they look not only at the huge star furnaces throughout the galaxies, throughout the universe, all the way down to the most minuscule little particle that we can discover. That's all moving. It's all moving, and that is part of what the miracle invited to this dance is really about. So being a verb drops that sense of separateness of I am here and that is there. Um, and as I've said in previous sessions, that sets up living kind of in an aggressive sort of way, not embracing our continual sense of becoming. It's a wonderful Zen saying that when I was young, I was a beginner. When I was middle aged, I was a beginner. And now I'm at an old age, I'm convinced. I've always been a beginner. Give yourself a chance to begin again. With every single sunrise. Give yourself that permission to not only embrace your humanness and who you have come to accept yourself being, but also on a much deeper level, to be able to embrace um, that we participate. Spirituality needs to be participating, not sitting on the sidelines or you know, turning it into kind of an intellectual, academic, theological kind of thing. But get in there and get your hands dirty with it. Um, that's what is it. It doesn't have to be a static, far removed kind of thing. It doesn't have to be um, something that you have to be proficient in. It comes down to what's the very next thing I can be doing that will express a deeper, more meaningful part of who I am, my being part. I read a example of this quite a while ago that really seemed to make sense. And it went something like this. I hope I don't butcher it too badly. They use the metaphor of being an artist. You don't have to know everything before becoming an artist. You go be an artist first, and then you decide what you want to call yourself. You can't just study art and all the books and artists and theories and all that kind of stuff. That doesn't define you being an artist. Picking up those brushes or those pencils or those pens and looking at that blank piece of paper or canvas and making that first stroke fearlessly, participating in the process. And the more mistakes you make, the better you get. And so we have this permission of being fluid and functional and creative. And nobody ever learned to be an artist by reading books or studying theory. That's all fun and interesting. Nobody ever learned to be a concert pianist or a great rock musician or a horticulturist just by reading. No, they had to get into it. They had to get messy with it. And that's the beauty of having our spiritual work take on the energy of being a verb. And allowing ourselves to be very fluid. Embracing our verbness, our verbing, our being, brings us more in connection with how everything else is going on. I mean, for a long time, human beings have viewed themselves as conquerors of nature and separate from their environment. Their environment is something to be acted on rather than interacted with. I use a metaphor that I hope will be helpful with this. It's the metaphor of a canoeist or kayaker or however you want to image you want to have, going down a river. And the river's moving along and it's twisting and turning, and there's some rough spots, some white water, there's some rocks, there's some fallen trees, there's all sorts of things that are just the natural part of the river being a river. It's riverness. And we don't like this very much. Our ego is saying, no, it shouldn't be going this way. It should be smoother, or it should be going according to my plan of things. It should be, I don't like this. It's something I call insistence and resistance. That ego part that gets in the way of our spiritual growth insists that things go according to the plan of the ego. How it fits in with our self-concept, how the world views us, how successful we are, how competent we are, how whatever kind of definition ego is attached to. And the resistance is the energy we put into saying no. So here we have our canoeist or kayaker going down the river, not liking what's going on. And she just finally has had it. Sticks the paddle down into the bottom of the river. Says, I'm not moving until some things change, because this isn't going at all the way I want it to go. And you know, it could be anything in life. It could be our job. It could be a wedding. It could be our health, whatever it might be. So here she is, sticking the paddle in the bottom of the river, which stops her boat. And she's sitting there just wrestling because, you know what? The river hasn't stopped the current. It's still flowing along. As a matter of fact, the river just really doesn't care. It's doing its riverness. But our ego is saying, no, we got to have it be this way. We got to be a noun. We have to have importance. We have to have a label. It has to go the way we think it should go. And that's how we create so much suffering for ourselves is when we view ourselves as a noun. It's like we stick that paddle in the bottom of the river and say, wait a minute, universe. You know who you're dealing with here? It isn't until we take the paddle out and learn to navigate. Learn to navigate. The river's going to flow anyhow, no matter how much you insist and resist. Insist that it be different and resist until it is. That's where we stay stuck. And we carry around all sorts of stuff we've accumulated in our lives, things that have happened to us as a child or a teenager, or young adult, unfair things, wounding things, whatever. And we stay stuck with that. That's who I am. Life has not been fair to me. I want it to be different. Well, you're missing out on a lot of stuff if you don't pull the oar out and learn how to navigate, whether you're kayaking or paddling, learning how to get through the rapids around the bridge or portage, as some people say it, around trees that have fallen, how to interact with how things are emerging. So we have this opportunity to step back and participate rather than putting so much energy into insisting and resisting. Participate in the verbness of creation. Again, I leave how you want to define it up to you. You want to call it God, you want to call it Buddha nature, you want to call it Brahman, you want to call it the universe, you want to call it George. I leave that up to you. Because naming the it is just this little thing up here trying to figure out the enormity of what creation actually is that we're learning on a daily basis. So just to participate, pull the oar out and learn how to navigate. Are you going to get wet? Yeah, you're going to get wet. You're going to capsize? Yeah, maybe. But you know what? You're going to get back in and you're going to continue to navigate. It's not always going to be smooth because, one of the things I say to myself when I find myself tempted to stick that paddle in is nobody asked me. The universe didn't consult with Tom Roberts and say, well, how do you think things should be? And we'll adjust accordingly. Doesn't work that way. So be a verb, be fluid, interactive. Okay, let's end with a brief meditation here. So get yourself comfortable. Orient to your breath. Follow that breath all the way down to its completion. And rest there. Relaxing into our verbness brings us closer and closer to our divine self, our true self, our universal being, again, names. Participating with rather than insisting and resisting is that opportunity to move even closer to that place that then allows us to return back into the world just because we're sitting quietly in meditation, coming back home, reconnecting, reminding ourselves. Doesn't mean all that stuff out there stops. But what this does is it equips us to return. Return with a greater sense of gratitude, humility, patience, compassion. So as you're sitting there, just following your out-breath, And take a moment to bring your awareness to that place. That is open and spacious and knowing. Takes us to that place where we can remind ourselves this is the place from which I return to the world. Remind ourselves of our inherent connection to what is continually being creating, ing. Creation didn't just happen. It continues to happen. Every breath, every heartbeat, every thought, every distraction, every frustration, every joy. It continues. The more we separate ourselves from it, the more we will suffer and the further we will stray from doing our deeper spiritual work. I think one of the most honoring, respectful, holy, if you will, things that we as human beings can do at any given time is to remind ourselves we've been invited to this dance. We have been invited to this dance. And when we consider how huge this dance is, and it's clear that we don't know, but a fraction of what is out there is what is continually being created. One of the most honoring and humbling and holy, if you will, things that we can do is continue to come back home and remind ourselves I'm a verb. I knew who I was this morning, but I've changed several times since then. What a beautiful thing. What a playful thing. What an honoring kind of thing. Human being. So let yourself just consider this and what it can mean for your spiritual work. And how it can help connect you with the dance deeply, meaningfully, with richness and creativity. Our work isn't to anesthetize ourselves from life. Quite on the contrary. It's to invite us to roll up our sleeves and dig even deeper. Okay, as we wind up here, a couple of things I'd like to close with here. One is Always remind you, if you have questions or comments or suggestions, please feel free to message me through the Zen Times website. I'd be more than happy to answer, provide information, help in any way that I can. And also to remind you that the Zoom Zen Times is coming up. After every fifth times, I provide a longer session. I put aside about an hour um, to explore topics that maybe some of you have sent to me saying, would you talk more about this? Or I can just simply come up with something and it may be something that we've already covered and go into it in more detail. Um, have more time to interact and discuss. It will be on Zoom, so please make sure that if you're interested, you send me your email so I can send you the link so that we can participate. And you can participate without being seen if you don't want, to be on the screen or what have you, but your voice can still be there or what have you. So that can always um, happen for yourself as well. Um, in closing, enjoy your verbing. Till the next time.